Hello, everyone. It's Mary Lurson, Executive Director of the NAMM Foundation, and thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar, Online Learning, It Can Be More Than You Think. Thank you so much for logging in, and we invite you to please add your name and where you are today, city, state, country, so we have a sense of the great people that are joining us interested in this topic. If you joined us before on a NAMM or a NAMM Foundation webinar, we always have to open with a little bit of housekeeping. We do operate under a rigorous antitrust policy that the participants on today's webinar do not exchange competitively sensitive information. And if you'd like more information on our antitrust policy, we invite you to visit us at namm.org. So what we're going to be covering today with our remarkable panelists that have joined us on this important event. I was just counting off the months in the last couple of hours that we're 6 months into this reality, and as creative learners, I think we've learned an awful lot, and we did our very first online learning webinar back in March, and it's going to be very interesting to see the creative efforts and learning that we've accomplished to date and where we still need to go. So what we are going to be covering today, engaging in effective online instruction from a variety of points of view, our concern for equity and access. We know that is a very top of mind relative to where students are and what their needs are. The role of district and organizational leadership to achieve what we want to achieve for children, how we assess their learning, safety and convenience, and some interesting updates from Zoom and how it's supporting our music learning and music making online. One of the great opportunities we have at the NAMM Foundation is to engage with really important, critical national, international partners. And one of our most beloved partners is the Young Audiences Organization and its National Executive Director, David Dick. I can see in his little thumbnail. Hi, David. Great to have you. And a few years ago, we went to David and said, would he partner with the NAMM Foundation and we could establish the Nonprofit Management Institute? And it's under that umbrella programming that we're presenting the webinar today. The goal of the program is that we want to strengthen nonprofit service organizations in the music making and the music education sector, knowing that when those organizations are strong and thriving and providing great resources and opportunities, the entire music making sector within the community level gets stronger and more available and more accessible and more equitable. So, and we've affectionately referred to David as the Dean of the Nonprofit Management Institute. So with that, I turn the programming and the introduction of our wonderful panelists over to Dean David. David, over to you.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you so much, and just such a pleasure working with you and your team. So good afternoon, everybody. But I also noticed from the chat, for some it's good evening, and for others it's good morning. So I'm just thrilled that you're all here today. Professional learning is just a great time to kind of lift ourselves up out of our world, and in this case, take an hour just to really dive deep, into the work itself. So I'd like to do the following. We're going to have the presenters turn on their cameras, and we're going to have all of you turn off your cameras, all right? And that way, for those who are observing the work this year, who make sure you turn off your camera and put yourselves on mute as well, right? So it was great seeing you all kind of come into the room. At the end, we'll bring you back into the room, as it were. But I'm thrilled here today that our panelists, and we have 5 extraordinary people. The first panelist that will speak today is Liz Guglielmo, who is the Director of Music at the Office of Arts and Special Projects at the New York City Department of Ed. Then we have Melissa Gawlowski Pratt, who is a colleague of mine at Young Audiences, and she is our new Director of Strategic Partnerships and Network Relations. Third presenter will be Maria Palma, who is the Executive Director of the Office of Arts and Special Projects at the New York City Department of Ed. Fourth presenter, Ted G., who's co-founder and president of Live Music Tutor. And then we'll be wrapping up with Matt LeFevre, media production manager at the Yale School of Music. looking at our next slide, as a former classroom educator and a teaching artist, I think it's always important we start with what's the hour going to look like. So we're going to begin with 30 minutes, and that's going to break up to about 5 or 6 minutes presenters. And I put here 5 perspectives with one unified student-centered message. And what you're going to continue to hear in the work is we look at the needs of our students, all students, to really guide and think about our instruction. So in the next 30 minutes, there's going to be a lot of sort of delivery conversations, but also we need to really think about what are the outcomes and move it from there. After that, I think one of the most important pieces of coming together is just allowing you all to come into some groups and talk. And so what we're doing is we're going to have 20 minutes of breakout discussions where you'll be randomly assigned into a room of about 7 or 8 participants per room. And we want this to be very conversational. I think 8 people in a room can do that. And during that, I'll provide a little more detail, but this is really an opportunity for you just to share and explore what your practice is. And if there are things that were discussed in the first 30 minutes to help you rethink that practice, really open that up. And we've got a mechanism also to how to capture that. And then from there, we're going to do a little closing here, just talk about new insights, next steps. I think NAMM really prides itself on you start right on time and you end on time. So we may go a couple minutes over, but we're going to see like all worthwhile endeavors to really try to stick to the calendar and wherever the discussion takes us. So, so with that, let us start with Liz Guillermo. Please, during the presentations, if any questions come up, please use the chat for everyone function that's in the chat box. Both Mary Lurson and I will try to grab some of that information as we're talking to answer that a little bit. But also the chat provides a great record that at the end, if there's some extensive questions, we can answer them later. So with that, Liz, please start.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad to be joining you today and sharing in a nutshell some key ideas around effective music instruction in remote school settings. I'd like to start with the idea that connection and personal relevance remain at the heart of engaging students. This has always been true, but now more than ever, it's critical for us to prioritize helping students feel visible and valued. To a degree, this is about nurturing and fostering relationships with our students, but it's also very much about instructional design. Engaged classrooms have teachers who are always asking, how can I make this about them? Voice and choice, this is their mantra. Choice boards are one tool students can use to explore musical content in ways that resonate with them, and one of the most effective curricular strategies for empowering students to direct their own learning path is carving out space for students to create. Songwriting and music production are huge areas of interest right now. Last year, the DOE's Office of Arts and Special Projects partnered with the Songwriters Hall of Fame to engage 250 students from around the city in the New York City Song of Hope project, where K-12 students from across all 5 boroughs wrote a new New York City anthem. We started by sharing an instrumental track, for which students contributed original lyrics, rap verses, melodies, and their musical ideas were rolled together into one cohesive song. And then we provided a guide track for performing the song and edited together all the individual performance submissions to make the final video. If anybody'd like to see it, I'm just pasting the link right now into the chat if you'd like to take a look at the video. This collaborative songwriting project really helps students process their experience of the pandemic and adopt a hopeful outlook. And the project really brought together voices of students who wouldn't have otherwise worked together. So going forward, we have a template of the process for future creative collaborations. The next key point emphasizes the importance of making intentional strategic choices about how we use instructional time, particularly about what we plan to do synchronously and asynchronously. And for clarity's sake, synchronous learning is when the teacher and all the students gather together online at the same time and interact with one another in real time. And asynchronous learning doesn't require anyone to gather any particular to be there together at any particular time, but content is available online and students can access, when it's best for them. Now, we do need to know our students well to make the best judgment calls about what to do synchronously and what to do asynchronously. But at the same time, making the most of our time together means leveraging how we use our time apart. We're really talking about a flipped classroom model where new learning happens when we're apart so that we can rehearse, discuss, and troubleshoot effectively together. Many school music teachers have been providing study recordings, slide decks, videos for students to be learning and practicing on their own, and reserving synchronous time for coaching and troubleshooting, which can only happen in real time together. So in essence, this strategy is about reserving synchronous time for what can only happen synchronously. It's also beneficial to match our artistic process to the most authentic instructional format. So for example, songwriters in the real world often begin by taking some solo time to reflect and generate ideas before they share and collaborate. So in a songwriting project, it would be strategic for us to allocate some asynchronous time for students to gather their thoughts, followed by some synchronous time for small group sharing and feedback. And we can also leverage asynchronous time for differentiating assignments and tailoring tasks to the correct level of difficulty. This way, students can be working from where they are toward their own personal best, and no one has to know that the assignment in their inbox is different from the assignment in someone else's inbox. The last key point is really that we maintain motivation and direction when we know where we're going and we receive frequent specific feedback. Teachers who set up systems, structures, and timelines that support tight feedback loops are really keeping students engaged and holding everyone accountable. This includes setting clear expectations and pre-planning the junctures where students will submit work for feedback. One valuable strategy that's easier to implement than ever is cloud-based recording portfolios. Students receive instructive feedback and they feel motivated and proud to see how far they've come. A group of 8th graders in Manhattan, along with their music teacher, had the idea to re-perform one selection from their first concert in 6th grade and compare it to their last virtual performance in 8th grade, which is really satisfying and a great way to close out the middle school years. Tying it all together, these concepts, connection, strategic use of time and format, and frequent specific feedback are not unique to remote settings, but aspects of the remote learning experience have accentuated their quintessential importance and really compel us to sharpen up our skills in these areas. So I encourage us to keep these ideas at the forefront of our thinking as we continue exploring effective remote instruction. Thanks so much.
Liz, thank you so much. A quick, it's interesting. I think as musicians, so often we think about performing, right? And certainly performing is one of the 4 artistic standards built into the national art standards. But the other 3 processes are to create, respond, and connect. And those are all sort of words you used in your presentation. A quick question: the New York City Sound of Hope project, which looks just phenomenal, did that happen as a result of the pandemic? And do you think it would have happened had the pandemic not occurred?
It was a direct result of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And actually, I think that the pandemic created this space in a certain way for us to have that project. I don't think that would have become like a forefront project if it hadn't been for the pandemic.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I think about if we start to approach our learning design for students through that idea of being able to create music, certainly respond to what we've to what we've created other people, and those connections. I think it's an interesting portal to move into performances and the performing side. And it also gets me thinking, as a result, rather than creating performers, are we actually creating musicians, which I think is sort of the goal. So thank you so much. Melissa, my colleague from YA, you're up next, please.
Thank you so much, David. I'm thrilled to be with all of you here today. In the spring, I worked closely with a cohort of teaching artists as we looked to move our work in the classroom online. And for us, what we found was that really deeply considering partnership, the same way that we do in person, was really essential to making the work successful. So baking it in from the very beginning through the execution. And some of the things that means, it's ranging from logistical planning to, the conceptual design. So aligning with the school's preferred platform, whether that's Google or Zoom, making sure that you're providing continuity for the young people, and being cognizant of if there are any time limits around video instruction. For example, for some schools, there's a cap on how much live video time that students can engage with. So making sure you're working within those parameters and supporting the school as much as possible. And as Liz said, really strategizing your formats, thinking about what's live, what's pre-recorded, what is, using a different format, and what's the rationale? How can you kind of map that out and scaffold that? Any alignment that you can create with the experience that your teacher partners are creating for the young people, it's going to make it more successful. So if you're tying into content that's being covered, or rituals that you've learned that they're engaging in to build an online culture community that's only going to reinforce the work and make it richer for everybody involved. And to that, thinking about how you can engage your partner in the home, which is the caregiver. As a parent myself, I know that I'm not always available to be right at the computer with my daughter when she's engaging online. And so should someone need to step away, trying and addressing them perhaps directly right at the top, so that they know how to best support you, and front loading any supply needs, either before the video itself or in that first moment, to make sure that you have that partner ready and able to set things up. And then thinking about what are some of the alternative supplies or modifications that might be necessary if the student doesn't have the supplies you're looking for, since we're all at home right now. So for example, if it's a percussion activity with a box, can they also use a trash can? Can they use their bodies? And might you model that for them so that they can really see how they can enter into the activity? And to that, then really thinking about accessibility, thinking about how you can engage your students where they're at and support their needs. So considering multiple formats and how you're giving your instruction. So if you are talking through instructions, perhaps there's an opportunity there to post it, perhaps a written agenda you might post on the wall and talk the students through, and they can kind of follow along. If you're showing a video, taking the time to describe it, or if you're showing, any kind of visual imagery, describing it so that for the students or their caregivers, if they are using auto captioning and from there perhaps auto translation, that they're able then to access that content and follow along with what's going on. And then same as you would in the classroom, considering principles of universal design, multiple means of engagement and expression, as Liz touched on as well. Thinking about how can you engage the students in multiple modalities, drawing, writing, speaking, moving. How can you use some of the tools that we have online? Of course, the emojis and the chat function, but also utilizing other platforms. There are great free platforms you can use for collaborative drawing, for recording audio or video clips that the young people can then record on their phones on their own time in their own space and send it over to you. So those are some of the strategies that we found were helpful to us.
Thank you, Melissa. The word partnership is so important, and we think about that collaboration of a teaching artist with an ideal situation with the certified music teacher and the classroom teacher. But also when you mentioned caregivers, and I think thinking about your role of parents, I remember in my school district, the very first day they went to distance learning, and talking to a neighbor who, for the very first time, at 12:30 that day, that student who's in kindergarten had general music. And the parent was telling me that through the online piece, they've never seen the process of creating music. They've been brought in for the assembly, they've been brought in for the concert, but this way to really open that up, and boy, what an incredible advocacy strategy as well, if we can see some enduring value in this work, and I think it's just phenomenal. So, Maria, I think we've set up a great classroom context, the context of really good teaching, really good partnership, really responding, to the needs of students. But there's that larger piece, and we to think about the school itself and the district. So please go right ahead.
Thank you so much, David. If we are serious about music education and as advocates, then administrators really have to be committed to the supporting and creating the conditions for success for students, teachers, and our partners. I think it's really important that we keep in mind a few key things. There should be an agreed upon understanding of how remote learning will function to engage students. Technology is a tool for quality instruction. It's not an end to itself. So we have to kind of keep that that front of mind in terms of being mindful of effective instruction. We want to be able to encourage planning between teachers and partners, teachers and parents, and indeed between teachers and students themselves. We want to be able to make sure that we build in ongoing feedback to check on how things are going. It's important, of course, to communicate clear guidelines, foster our stakeholder buy-in about the essential role of music education. We want to be certain that we've covered the kind of legal framework and parameters for the online world. We want to be able to keep our students safe. We want to be mindful of their well-being, and particularly in remote environments. And we certainly want to, if we think that we're going to share student work down the line, districts and schools want to be mindful of keeping media consent forms and permission slips to share that work. And we certainly want to be able to engage parents as partners and have them feel comfortable in supporting their own students and not frustrated. And there are any number of mechanisms that you can set up, from a buddy system to a help desk. And an important part, an essential part of all of this is going to be the ongoing professional learning and support that either a school leader or a district administrator puts in place. Teachers themselves need to be part of online professional learning communities with the time and opportunity for them to share their challenges, successful strategies to take risks, to fail and try again based upon outcomes for their students. And school leaders need to have the opportunity to support one another and a venue to share concerns and challenges and successes as well. A really key aspect of this work is going to ensure equity and access, and that all of our students become successful learners and musicians, as David pointed out, not just performers. In doing that, it's really important that we know our students well. We need to be mindful of diverse learners, of accommodations that may be necessary, and the accessibility of remote resources that Melissa so clearly outlined for us. I know in New York City, we have to, anything that we put up and share has to be ADA compliant and mindful of multilingual learners as well. And equitable access it's not just about the hardware and the internet access, but it's also about ensuring that all of our students have the access to their teachers and the time that they need with their teachers. I think it's critically important that we be mindful of ongoing authentic assessment in music. I'm not talking about evaluation here. I'm talking about the kind of formative assessment that is in fact an authentic artistic process involving feedback and revision. An assessment isn't something that you do to a student. It should really provide an opportunity for the student learning independence and for them to be able to take ownership of their own learning. Feedback needs to be based on clear criteria and learning targets that don't just tell students what to do, but allow them to know where they are going and why. The modes of that could be teacher feedback, peer feedback, and self-reflection, and that all has to be built into the online environment as well. This really will provide some really key motivation for the independent work that can happen asynchronously or in a flipped classroom setting. So those are just a few things for us to keep in mind, but I know that everybody who's involved in this call is really committed to making really good online learning available to our students in music.
Terrific, Maria. Maria, I'm finding lately that there's a rush here to try to prove that this online piece is working, right? And I think to your point, we're still in experimentation, but I'm just wondering, you know, the great moment here about authentic assessment, I think, is through an online platform, we do have a ability to capture the work, and you really describe brilliantly this notion of student as action researcher of their own work, and boy, incredible, just professional learning around how do teachers create that kind of learning community. Could you talk a little bit about just the challenges of technology, kind of in an urban, because you were mentioning the word remote, and you know, there's a place where urban meets rural, right? And it is just as remote and isolating in some urban neighborhoods. But just what have been those struggles just in New York with bandwidth, right?
Bandwidth, internet access. There was just a challenge of getting 500,000 devices out to students tablets that they could be able to use that would have built-in wireless cellular connectivity. That alone was a tremendous in very short order, and there was still gaps, and
Sure.
it's things that we have to all address and be mindful of with that kind of constant monitoring and checking in about how our students are doing and how their families are doing, and trying to get really practical and factual information so that we can make good decisions based on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much. Ted, we're kind of moving into that place now really about what are the techniques, what's the technology that's working or not working, and just through your practice, just what are some of the considerations you've made in terms of that? Hey, Ted.
Hello, David. Thanks a lot. And hello, everyone. First of all, we have been working with schools online for almost about the past 7 years. We've had some great experiences working with the public schools, with charter schools, virtual schools, homeschoolers, and for really providing supplemental lessons. And a couple things that I think is very important is that the experience that we have providing online music education is key. But the other thing is that a lot of fear with the students, with instructors believing that they're going to be replaced, and that's never going to happen. I think there's a place to make sure that that's clear. But as you look at as everyone has had to shift to online focus, we've looked at some of the experience enhancers for the music lessons in the classrooms and virtually. And one of the things that we believe has been pretty consistent is safety, and making sure that some platforms where you may have external access or hacking into the system or disrupting the classroom, that there are opportunities to address this and try to minimize this as much as possible. Sometimes being able to have platforms and solutions that do not require external download of software and those things. Making sure that the students as well as the instructors are comfortable with making sure that they have certain dress, that you don't have people laying in the bed trying to conduct or provide a lesson. Some of these things that we believe is really important to the overall experience. Something else we really focused on and have seen kind of across the board with online learners is making sure that the students, their environment is comfortable. So where there may be some background views that people may not want exposed to the public, it's important to be able to have features to either shield that or static features to make the students more comfortable in the class so that they don't have to expose their overall environment to everyone. Convenience is a key factor, and although students may be the ones that's taking the lessons, it's very important to have ease of use and ease of access to systems so that parents can get on the system very easily. In a lot of cases, the instructors have a kind of a cheat sheet to show them how to get on the system, what to do if they have certain problems. And we think that making sure that everybody's comfortable as part of the experience is very important. We've had some concern with the overall experiences of online education with capital requirements and people needing to buy additional equipment. We found that making sure that people have the proper equipment, even if they have an additional microphone or additional speakers, good. Some fun features for music education and for the kids to have as they're learning online is being able to have school mascots, or maybe have the background tempered in the school's colors to give a little bit of esprit de corps. Making sure that there is language around the visual and sound if they're having problems, and just having help in the overall experience they may be having during the lesson. And all this being said, that we believe that the experience online can be very positive. We've had a lot of success with a lot of schools and districts across the country, And although everybody's been forced to work online, we think that all the resources together and the best practices can really make this transition that's not replacing people, not supplanting people, but supplementing music education and continuing to allow it to flourish and be part of all kids' well-rounded education.
Ted, thank you. You know, that continued marching order of support, not supplant, right?
Yes,
Is so important. You know, I've talked to a number of educators that have just had a really tremendous positive experience working with students to create their own virtual backgrounds, right?
yes,
And from a visual arts exercise, a virtual, that you can really unpack and talk about why did you make the artistic decisions that are there. Similar to the same idea of why we really in many places have school uniforms, right?
yes,
To help sort of equalize, and for many they may not want to share that background, right?
Yes,
And I think that that's so important there. But also I think for what you're saying, boy, if you don't take care of the little things, the big things will not take care of themselves, right? And
correct.
just having that right piece there, and doing it right from the beginning. So anyway, that is just terrific. Thank you so much.
Thank
and
you, David.
And so that leaves us with Matt, who's going to connect us a little bit on the technology, but also it's interesting. Today we use the word Zoom in Google as just sort of describing activities, and Zoom has really become one of those, and certainly some innovations that have happened there. But Matthew, please take it away.
I do. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, like David just mentioned, Zoom became so ubiquitous when we all went remote, and so here at Yale we gathered a bunch of conservatories together to brainstorm improvements that we could present to Zoom to enhance the quality of the audio over Zoom lessons and Zoom conferences. So we wrote them a letter co-signed by a bunch of conservatories around the country, and we set up a meeting with the engineers, and they really heard us out and listened to our needs. And about a month later, they presented a beta version of their new software that incorporated some of these asks. Testing went really well with our students and with our faculty. One particular test that went really well, I was with a faculty member at the Peabody Institute, and he had been really discouraged by the way his lessons had been going over FaceTime or Google Meet or WhatsApp or any of these video conferencing platforms. The audio was just really hard to work with. So he went into that meeting really discouraged with how his lessons had been going. And at the end of the meeting, he said to us, "Wow, I can really teach with this new tool." So just roughly, I'll go over the changes that were added. The resolution of the audio was quadrupled. The data transmission allotted for the audio was quadrupled. The Zoom's filters that are traditionally sculpted to the sound of a human voice and instructed to reject any background noise or anything that doesn't recognize as human speech were disabled in order to not interfere with any of the music that might be happening. And the better stereo integration for these higher quality microphones that we are using for lessons is super important for the transmission of music. So the specs themselves, you don't have to be a huge techie to appreciate these numbers, but the sampling rate doubled, and the actual allotment for audio transmission quadrupled. So huge increase in quality there, as well as removing these things that interfere with music made a huge improvement to the overall sound. So this again won't, this won't replace any super dedicated audio platform that you may already be using. But as far as a one-stop shop and a really simple and user-friendly tool, this is a huge step forward for what they've been, what we're used to. So just a quick PSA: if you do want to use this tool, it is available as of September 1st. So if you check the version of Zoom you're using, if it's anything above 5.2.2, you will have access to it. So just some tips if you plan on checking this out. Make sure you have a really good network connection, and a hardwired Ethernet connection is preferred, but as strong of a connection as you can. An external microphone, if you have access to it, the better your audio is going into the computer, the better it'll sound on the way out. And headphones, this is really key, because those filters that I was talking about, removing those filters also will introduce a little bit of echo. And so if you are wearing headphones, that echo will be suppressed, and you should be able to not hear yourself just slap back and a second later. So so that's if you want to use this new feature. Those are sort of my tips. And next to this, you'll see a screenshot of the advanced features, and I have all these boxes checked, and that's really how we optimize our high fidelity music mode.
Terrific, Matt. Thank you so much. I'm assuming if Zoom has figured this out, all the other video platforms are going to figure it out as well, right?
I should hope so. I think in a lot of ways this was such an obvious win, which is why Zoom was able to really collaborate with us, because it was on their end a pretty light lift, and we were asking for reasonable stuff, and I would imagine that others will follow.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a son who's a senior in college, and I remember last spring the frustrations he was having during a trumpet lesson where he just was not. He was being told he wasn't following the dynamic markings, and no matter what he did, the program just kept leveling it out, right? But I'll give a call to Comcast this afternoon, telling them you've got to improve my bandwidth, right? And there's so many things there, but I think just knowing that, and I think it's a good time for people to think about just some of those the technology investments as musicians, right? Even an external microphone for less than $100 can just change everything, right? So just thank you so much. Thank you to our presenters. I'm cracking the whip here, and they just did a phenomenal job. So thank you very much. We go, hey, terrific, everybody. Keep your cameras on. I think it's great to kind of see everybody. We don't have much time, but Mary, music just finds a way, doesn't it?
It sure does, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I hope everyone enjoyed that breakout. Can you either nod your head or wave? Was the breakout a meaningful experience for you? We're going to be doing these breakouts on all of our webinars, and we really hope that you'll come back. And it went fast, and we populated our screen, and I ran out of room on my screen, so someone's going to have to go back and fix my fonts. I didn't know how to do that. But David, what did you see was happening?
Mary, a while ago I heard we were talking about what is the relationship to the local music dealer and the shop, right, to their schools. And I was talking about the fact that schools right now are so inundated with the here and now. The last thing they're thinking about is, who do I partner with, right? But Mary, I heard you once say that the power of the question, what can I do to help, is huge, right? And I think for everyone right now, what can I do to help is there. What's fabulous with the Google Slides is just some great things coming up about words like flipped classroom, a lot of technology, flipped grid, kind of all these questions that are there. But I think, with this, now that we've got that, and to match that up with the PowerPoint, Mary, what I'm just seeing is that everyone's kind of out there doing this work and really trying to lift up the practice. And I wish we had another hour for a conversation. It may be fun somewhere. I'll throw it out there that as a group, we get back together in the spring, right? After the great things you're doing in January, and just say, where are we? But the one thing I think I saw consistently is we're seeing the value add that technology brings to this. Yes, we have to be mindful of our success, right? But we need to be continuing to think about how do we use the technology to even expand, include our presence. How do we really think about all children, all students, all families, everything else. So I thought they were great, and thank you for using the technology and everything. So those are my final thoughts. Mary, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Yeah, my final thoughts was, I think that it came out loud and strong, is that this is not easy. And it's not necessarily a cakewalk for every person, and some people are struggling with it, and there continues to be grieving and pain. And also, we're really concerned about our music and arts teachers, that they're burning out, and these transitions are really difficult.
Mary, the transitions are difficult
for them.
I've also found, though, a lot of times it's the music educator who has figured this out, and they should also be thinking about their role for professional learning of their colleagues throughout the entire school.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And that too, that there needs to be a time and place where we generally do support each other and we're patient with each other. And I really, and then Mark Anderson of Anaheim reminded us that we have to be relentlessly positive, and he got extra credit for that. So we thank you so much for joining us. I want to remind you of what's ahead. First of all, the slide deck from today will be available and will be on the website, I believe. We might be taking the Google, this is our first time using Google Slides. It was a very interesting exercise. We'll probably compress them a little bit and say outcomes and post that as a doc. But please join us. We're jumping right into next week, Wednesday, back to school health, wellness, and safety. We're going to talk with Ping Ho, who's done some great work with Beat the Odds and social emotional learning and traumatic environment learning, and the great work that she's done, and also Mark Speed with the aerosol study and the mitigation efforts that are ongoing right now to make sure that ensembles can perform together. And then also next week, at the end of next week, we're jumping into our new series, Music and Social Justice, with the question, what should we be doing? And we're going to lay some groundwork so we can have a conversation together over the next several months about we can improve our ability to really communicate with each other about the things that we're concerned about access and equity in our classrooms, in our communities, in our businesses. But most of all, we love the opportunity to engage with you in any way that we can. You know where to find us at nammfoundation.org, on our website, and we hope to see you next week. David, you deserve the title Dean. Thank you. Thank you for being the Dean of the Nonprofit Institute, for our remarkable presenters, for all the work that you're all doing, and for all of you for joining us. We'll say goodbye, and thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you all. Have a great evening.